Historic Missouri roadsides that you won't want to miss. Details next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Well, you know, if you're like me, sometimes you just want to get in the car and take off, see the countryside, see what's out there, and our next guest can help you do that. Please welcome Bill Hart. He is the author of Historic Missouri Roadsides. And Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Hey, before we get going on this is the second edition of your book, and people remember Reedy Press as the publisher, and people remember last year the big fire they had, and we've had several other authors on. So what happened to you happened to a lot of them. You lost a lot of your books in that warehouse fire.
Absolutely. We had originally published in 2016. The publisher had just ordered a second printing of the book, and right after they received the book is when the fire broke out in the warehouse, and which resulted in the losing of 350,000 books. Wow. Actually in their warehouse. Right. So it gave us an opportunity to kind of dust off the first edition, to do a second edition and add some content to the second edition.
And how did the idea for this book ever come about to begin with?
It's interesting. One of my friends, another architectural historian, was asked by the publisher about doing some roadside architecture, featuring roadside architecture of Missouri, and he said, Bill Hart is the guy that you want to go to. He's your go-to guy for roadsides. So I met with Josh Stevens, the publisher, and showed him a lot of my photos, and he was smitten, and that began our journey into Historic Missouri Roadsides.
Well, I don't really have this historical perspective you do, but I love to get in my car sometimes and just take off and explore the roads. Were you that kind of guy, and is that what led you to sort of be interested in this?
I come from a really huge family. I grew up in southeast Missouri. We couldn't afford a lot of huge, lavish vacations, so our family entertainment a lot of times consisted of getting in the car, piling in and taking road trips with my dad, who exposed us to a lot of interesting places as a result of that. Then further on, I began working in 2008 for the Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation, realizing that roadside and small town historic resources are really an endangered species. So a lot of times I would endangering the lives of myself and others on a daily basis. If I encountered something that looked like it might not be there the next time I came through, I at least stopped to try to document the historic resource, realizing that it might be the last time it was documented, and oftentimes it might be the only time it was documented.
Yeah, because I think you make your point in the book. You talk about how times have changed with industries and small towns have changed, and that's sort of what prompted you to do this.
They certainly have. And I was just reading a couple of weeks ago about last year, the Census Bureau reported that almost half of Missouri's counties experienced population loss. And for a number of reasons, if family farms left, if railroad traffic left, if factory jobs left small towns, people left small towns. And at the same time, I realized that small towns that kind of capitalized on their history and their resources garnered more heritage tourism, if you will. So the intention of the book is to foster interest in small towns and to also foster that heritage tourism and the income that it brings to small communities. Like a travel book, I list in these tiny towns places to eat and visit and shop and events that happen there. But I only list local events, and I only list local stores. You won't find a Holiday Inn, but you will find lots of bed and breakfasts and motels. And you won't find a McDonald's, but you will find lots of fun mom and pop diners and the like to enjoy on the Missouri roadside on your trip.
And the point of your book too is these are places that most of us might not normally we're not going to see the ads in the newspapers for these places.
You're not going to see big ads. You're not going to see big billboards for podunk. And actually, in some of the small towns that have rediscovered themselves, you will see on the interstate. I've noticed one of the destinations in the book is Boonville, and that's a town that definitely has capitalized on its history, realizing that its history is a part of its future. Places like Arrow Rock and St. Genevieve. Sedalia, places that really do get that and treasure their history, can promote that history to foster tourism in their towns.
Boonville, I don't know a lot about it, but just on a personal note, my great-grandfather grew up in Boonville, and I know worked on a riverboat. What can you tell me about Boonville?
A great town with a lot of history, and actually, I highlight a lot of cemeteries in the book because obviously those are connected with the people in our past. There was a Civil War battle in Boonville. The president of the University of Missouri, and later the man who established the School of Journalism at the University of Missouri, is from Boonville. Has a rich history, has a rich railroad history. The Katy Bridge, obviously, being one of the saved resources in the last several years, connecting the other side of the Missouri River to Boonville on the Katy Trail. They've repurposed the Katy Depot as the Chamber of Commerce and a bike shops to cater to tourists along the route. So Boonville, again, is one of those towns that really gets it.
I think they have a casino now, but that's probably not.
That helps.
That's not in your book, right?
No, I do not list that as a place to. Although it is, in retrospect, it is a Missouri-owned business. It's owned by a man here in St. Louis.
Right. You obviously didn't know about all these places when you started out, did you?
Not a lot, and a lot of it I learned by osmosis, by traveling the roads myself. I hate interstate highways, and I will at all costs avoid them if I can. And if you do too, it's kind of hard to navigate places by asking Siri how to get there or asking your GPS to tell you how to get there, because you're always going to get the most expedient route, and it's always going to be on an interstate highway instead of a two-lane highway. So again, hoping that my book is a good roadside companion for your exploring small town.
Describe your book just a little bit, because it is full of photographs and photographs. It's much more than that, but at first glance you might think, oh, this is a coffee table book.
Exactly.
With
when you first look at it, because of the abundance of photographs, it looks like a coffee table book. But it's also, like I said, a travel book. There are 5 tours of Missouri on mostly 2-lane highways. Again, highlighting the historic resources in the towns that you traverse through in the book. But in addition to offering 5 tours on those 2-lane highways, in the second edition, I was also able to list 6 destination points. Places that aren't necessarily on one of those highways, but that you might want to go and spend a long weekend staycation or maybe a week-long vacation in a Missouri town.
So are there day trips too, or?
There are day trips, and any of the trips that are in the book, you can kind of, you don't have to do all of they kind of vary in length from probably 60 miles to 150 miles. So you can either do, you can do half and then ask your GPS what's the quickest way back to St. Louis if you want to do it that way.
How did you narrow down your towns and make the final selection on them?
Well, that was not an easy choice. Obviously, I want people to get off the interstate and enjoy the sights that Missouri has to offer. So I had to find contiguous routes on 2-lane highways, which wasn't always easy. A lot of my favorite towns were along U.S. Highway 50, which kind of parallels Interstate 70, only south of the Missouri River. But it's increasingly becoming a 4-lane highway, much like Highway 60 turned into in southern Missouri. So to kind of enhance the 2-lane experience, I had to try to cobble together on two-lane highways those destinations that included more interesting towns, in my opinion.
And those back roads are important because you're not just going from point A to B, getting a highway, but it's the journey, which is the journey between the towns is part of the experience too.
Absolutely. Missouri offers some of the most beautiful landscapes and countryside, unparalleled really, in a lot of states that I've been to. And I've had friends travel from California on road trips, doing Route 66 and the like, and they say, gosh, the trip was boring and brown for the entire time until we got to Missouri, and then it was green and it was beautiful.
Really?
So yeah, a lot of the landscapes, a lot of what's the interstice between towns is a very interesting.
Well, what kind of feedback are you getting from people about the book and maybe their experiences?
I have lots of people who've reported back to me that they have actually traveled, from start to finish, all of the road trips.
No kidding.
Getting pretty good feedback from both the people who have experienced the road trips, but also the people who have benefited from those tours.
Wow, I wonder if you did the whole thing, how long it would take. Have you ever figured that out?
I have not. It's designed so that you can enjoy at will and on your own schedule. So I encourage people to stop and enjoy and take their time. If someone's the wonderful and remarkable thing about being on a two-lane highway, and I did it on my way back from Sedalia just last Friday, was there was no one in front of me and there was no one behind me. There was nobody trying to get me to speed up or slow down.
Perfect. Yes, I hate those drivers too close to the back. The book is Historic Missouri Roadways, and we're going to continue with the author Bill Hart, and we're going to share some of the trips with you here in just a minute. We'll be back with more City Corner after this.
What I love about St. Louis is the 79 unique neighborhoods nestled into 108 city parks, including Forest Park, which is actually larger than Central Park in New York, and of course, the beautiful Tower Grove Park where I'm at now. Oh, the St. Louis Blues. We've got the St. Louis Surge, two-time WBCBL champions. We've got Harris Stowe, WashU, St. Louis University, and of course, the 11-time World Series champion, St. Louis Cardinals. So come experience St. Louis.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination. But don't just imagine. Use STEM to change the world.
Who's with me?
Oh, it's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
I'm Steve Potter, and welcome back to City Corner. Bill Hart is our guest. We're talking about the second edition of his book, which just came out, Historic Missouri Roadsides. And when I was just looking at the little intro to the show there, that looked like a 4-lane highway, which is not in your book, right?
And you won't find, I think there's 1 mile on an interstate highway that you have to take on one of the trips. Okay. The rest of them are all on 2-lane highways exclusively.
So to recap, Bill, just briefly, so what your book is about is you've mapped out tours of back roads that go through small historic towns, and you found places to eat and stay, but we're not talking chain restaurants or anything else, or things you probably that are being pushed necessarily by the Chamber of Commerce. These little out-of-the-way places that are historically significant and just interesting, I guess.
Absolutely. And the tours are designed, there are 5 tours in the second edition, and they encourage big city folks to get out and enjoy rural Missouri. So 2 of the trips have their originations close to Kansas City, and 3 of the trips have their originations close to St. Louis, encouraging people to get out of the big city and enjoy and perhaps appreciate the small towns.
And maybe relax and take a deep breath.
Absolutely.
Right. Let's look at one of the trips from your book. We're going to look at the map first, and then you've picked out a couple places along that route that you want to talk about. So what trip is this?
Sure. This is the El Camino Real trip. El Camino Real meaning, the translation, it's a French or a Spanish term meaning the King's Highway, and you'll find that this trip, a lot of streets have changed names in a lot of these towns to King's Highway in honor and homage to El Camino Real. El Camino Real was to be the Spanish trade route when Spanish held the territory of Louisiana. It was to connect the already established French city of St. Louis to what was to be the new capital of Spanish Louisiana, New Madrid, or New Madrid as we call it. So the trip originates in Jefferson County, just south of St. Louis, and travels down to the Boot Heel to New Madrid, Missouri.
And all those dark little spots, it looks like 20 or 30, each one of those is a place that you suggest people take note of.
Oh, as many towns as you travel through, I try to garner a little bit of history, garner interest through explaining a little bit of the history of the town, famous people who may have come from the town, and the amenities the town has to offer.
So the map we just looked at, this is one of the places on that trip. What are we looking at?
This is one of the first stops. This is historic Zwick, Missouri. A town that was started in the early 1800s by the Kim family. They were Swiss immigrants. The interest in the town and sort of the restoration of Zwick began early on by Luciana Gladney Ross, who contributed a lot of money to enhancing and restoring a lot of the historic resources in Zwick. This is probably its most famous restaurant, the Blue Owl, offering mile-high pies.
Yeah.
So that's obviously one of the historic places and one of the places to eat there in Zwick.
Let's look at the next image.
And then traveling further south, you'll see the moon and an ice cream cone.
So we're going from pie to ice cream.
This is Ginny's Frozen Custard in Barnhart. I just thought a cool roadside icon there, a little cafe that offers Ginny's famous frozen custards.
Let's look at the next one.
And then moving further south, one of Missouri's most historic towns, actually settled in advance of, by European settlers, in advance of St. Louis, St. Genevieve, established in the 1730s. People tend to think of colonial America as the eastern seaboard, and as early as the 1600s, there were settlers already, colonial settlers colonizing Louisiana and St. Genevieve. So it's a big part of American colonial history that's kind of overlooked, I think. There's some amazing architecture, some very rare examples of poteaux-en-terre architecture.
You have to explain that to me.
That meaning post in the ground. And whereas most colonial Anglo home building was done using vertical log construction, log homes, the French Creoles used vertical logs. So the foundation is a part of the structure, the walls as well.
Bill, you touched on this earlier, but talking about how small towns have changed, and like the factories or the places people had jobs a long time ago aren't there anymore. So it seems to me, is this the only way maybe some of these towns are surviving now, by playing up the historical aspect, because the factory jobs aren't there?
Absolutely. And I have found, again, like I said, towns that have rediscovered themselves through their history do kind of garner a lot more tourism and generate a lot more tourism dollars because of that fact.
Let's look at another trip in your book, Historic Missouri Roadways. What's this one?
This is actually heading north from the St. Louis area, from St. Charles County, tiny St. Paul, Missouri, to the Iowa border, Lewis County, Canton, Missouri. This is actually almost exclusively on Missouri Highway 79. I call this trip the River Road.
That goes to Ellsbury, doesn't it?
It does. It goes through many scenic town and offers many beautiful, beautiful sights and views of the Mississippi River.
And we have some of those to look at right now.
This is a really sweet little, looks like it was probably a hotel in Old Monroe in Lincoln County. And then heading further north from Old Monroe, I believe we go to Clarksville, which is another scenic Missouri river town. Then on to the next slide, if you show the city of Louisiana. Louisiana is a very cool and fun historic town. This is its main street. It's Georgia Street.
It looks old.
It has a really amazingly intact historic main street. Like I said, it's called Georgia Street. Further west on Georgia Street, you'll see some of the most beautiful homes in Missouri. A great view of the Mississippi, great views of the Mississippi from here as well. A really beautiful town. And this heading a little further north of Louisiana, one of the bridges leading, this is actually leading across the Mississippi River from the city of Louisiana. This bridge currently being reconstructed. It was one of the 1930s bridges that went across the Mississippi. And then heading further north, this is the federal courthouse building in Hannibal, an interesting town, and obviously its big tourist attraction is Mark Twain, being for a long time the home of Samuel Clemens. His house still exists in Hannibal, and across the street from it, his girlfriend's house, Becky Thatcher's house.
I had a great experience up there a few years back. I was asked to go up and meet with Hal Holbrook, who was there to make a presentation. I get to introduce Hal Holbrook and had him talk there, and it was just hearing Hal Holbrook talk about Mark Twain in Hannibal was really something.
It's awesome, and they have a great Mark Twain Historic Hannibal Museum that features a lot of interpretation on Samuel Clemens, and offers actually a nice collection of paintings by Norman Rockwell with Hannibal and its people as the subjects.
Another trip from your book to take a look at.
This I call the Lewis and Clark Gottfried Duden trip.
What was that?
Gottfried Duden was a German who traveled to, he considered Germany increasingly industrialized and crowded. He published a book in the 1840s, kind of chronicling his trip to the western, he called it the western states of America, and reported back to, the book was published, and as a result of it, lots of Germans settled this area. This area closely shadows the Missouri River, and lots of German settlement occurred here in the tracks of Lewis and Clark, what had been the tiny part of the Lewis and Clark Trail.
And some nice wine being made there these days.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, Missouri's earliest viticulture happened along this, beginning in the 1840s. Wine was produced in this area of Missouri and shipped from Missouri to all points of the world.
Where's the Old Dutch Motel?
Old Dutch, the trip starts in Gray Summit in Franklin County and heads west to a tiny town called Bonnet's Mill near Jefferson City in central Missouri. One of the first towns you'll encounter is Washington, Missouri. This is the Old Dutch Hotel, which has been renovated into a small boutique hotel, and bed and breakfast type motel and restaurant. Again, Washington being one of those cities that definitely has capitalized on its history. This moving west, Gottfried Duden could not probably have been more happy to see this town spring up in his western states of Missouri. This is the Courthouse in Hermann, Missouri, overlooking the Missouri, much as a German castle would have looked over the Rhine in Germany. And some beautiful, beautiful sights. And I think there are more bed and breakfast inns in Hermann than any other city, including St. Louis,
wow,
and including Kansas City,
wow,
in Missouri.
That's
I think
something.
there's something like 49 of them. Heading then west, this is the most substantial building in a little town called Frankenstein. I know, it's kind of creepy. But,
I had an Aunt Emma Frankenstein, by the way. I just want you to know.
Really?
Yes.
It was established by a man named Franken in the 1850s. But its claim to fame was in the 1980s upon the re-release of the Mel Brooks book, movie, Young Frankenstein. As a publicity stunt, they parachuted 25 Frankensteins to the ball field in Frankenstein. One of the biggest events in their history.
That'd be something to see.
And then finally, the last. This is a little bit off of Route 100 that the trip mostly follows. It's a little town called Bonnet's Mill. Bonnet's Mill is right at the confluence of the Osage and the Missouri rivers. Again, you can see this. The Dauphine Hotel is on a bluff, so you see the town is rolling hills. It's a beautiful landscape as well as a little townscape. The town was originally called Dauphine, so the Dauphine Hotel, which is now a bed and breakfast, bears the original name of the town. An interesting story about Bonnet's Mill is that during the Civil War, most of the Germans were very staunch Unionists. Not so in Dauphine, or Bonnet's Mill, if you will, and the Civil War era newspaper still exists in Bonnet's Mill. It's called The Unterrified Democrat.
Wow, and that's just a fraction of what you can learn and enjoy in this book. And I like it because it'd be fun to go with a family, but I could see like someone just going out on their own and still having fun with this.
Absolutely.
What's the best way to get the book?
You can order it online from my website, which is www.historicmissouriroadsides.com. If you're a bookseller, please contact the publisher at readypress.com. And it's available at your local big bookstores, but I encourage you to go and shop local at our local St. Louis bookstore.
Well, Bill Hart, it's a great book. It'd be a great gift too, I think. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And somehow I bet there's going to be a third edition someday.
Thank you for having me on. I hope so.
Thanks, Bill. I'm Steve Potter. That's all we have time for today for City Corner. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.